we asked our researcher to find a map and designate the extent of the Dakota Oyate territory, or the Buffalo Nation territory. And he didn't believe everything that was told to him. He's not a government appointed researcher. And just because the Dakotas hired him, he's not going to just accept everything that we tell him. So we told him, the elders told him that there were Dakotas on the East Coast. And he says, what are the Dakotas doing on the East Coast? I thought you followed the buffalo. You went where the buffalo went. And they told him, they said, well, there's buffalo on the East Coast, and he didn't believe it. And it wasn't that he was being ignorant or anything, it's just his nature. He has to, just because somebody tells him something, he's not going to believe it until he finds something on paper that's going to back it up, and that's why we hired this guy. So down on the East Coast here, after Columbus landed down here in 1492, what's called San Salvador now. After that, there were other explorations, Spanish explorers that came through. One of them was De Leon, and he came through this territory and he counted what they called at the time Nadasu, one of the words that Europeans gave to us. So in his travels, he encountered Nadasu, Dakota-speaking people down in here. And then in Georgia here, there's a town called Santee, and they're a Dakota-speaking community. So that answered his question, that there were Dakota people there. But then the other question comes up. He says, well, there's no buffalo on the East Coast. Why are the Dakotas on the East Coast if there's no buffalo there? So it turns out that there's a valley that goes through the mountains here, and there were buffalo on the East Coast. By this time, there was animosity between the Ojibways and the Dakotas. The Dakotas and the Ojibways and the Cree were at one time allies, and we lived by each other. We got information from a member in Cross Lake. Well, actually, there's three oral histories that we got from Cross Lake stating that very thing. During the Battle of the Little Bighorn, prior to that, runners went up north to Cross Lake, and they asked the Cree communities to help the Dakotas fight against the United States. They were telling them all the things that were happening to them. And so in Cross Lake and in Norway House, they had meetings, community meetings, to discuss whether or not they were going to help the Dakotas. And at these meetings, the younger generation said, why are we going to help the Dakota people? They're our natural enemies. And that's when the elders got up. You got to remember, this is in the 1770s. The elders got up and they said, no, that's not true. Back when we used to live around the Great Lakes, the Dakotas and the Crees and the Ojibways, we were all allies. We used to live beside each other. What he's talking about there is around the Great Lakes here. It was after the French and the British came, the French in particular, that they armed the northern Ojibways to fight against the Dakotas. And because they had lived together for so long, they were intermarried, and they couldn't fight each other. So instead of fighting, they moved west, which is where White Bear comes from. That's an oral history that we were told from Cross Lake. So at that meeting, Cross Lake residents decided that they were going to help the Dakotas, and there was a group of people up there. They were a soldier group, and this group was so strict that if you gave your son, or your son wanted to join this group, once he joined them, he wasn't part of your family anymore. He belonged to this group. And it was this group that went down and fought alongside the Dakotas at Little Bighorn. And they said none of them came back. They don't know if they all died down there. They don't know if they married down here and stayed down here, but none of them came back, they said. Norway House, on the other hand, didn't want to help the Dakotas, period. So that animosity that started, that's where it started from back then. The interesting thing about Cross Lake is back in the early 90s, they had what they called a Northern Flood Agreement. Nelson House, Split Lake, War Lake, Nelson House. They accepted agreement with Canada. And part of this agreement was that they were paid a lump sum of money. The only one that didn't go along with it was Cross Lake. Now the other communities around them, that money that they have, like what Orville was talking about here, if he took that $6.7 million, tomorrow we'd be in the same boat because all it would do is pay off our debt. Well, that's the same thing that happened up north. All these communities got their hundreds of millions of dollars, they're all broke now. Cross Lake is the only one that's left. And the elders there think that it has to do with our alliance with the Dakota people. That not giving. All the correspondence that the chiefs have ever received from the government of Canada, this is going right back to the 70s and the 80s, official correspondence. It says that the Dakota people are refugees from the United States. Every penny of funding that comes from the government is an act of grace. We're not entitled to it. You don't have any rights here. You don't have any land here. But because we're Canada, it's gonna be an act of grace on our part, and we're gonna help you. We're gonna give you money. That's the way they treat the Dakota people. That's why they treated the Dakota people right from when Canada became Canada. So, proposal to address the grievances of the Dakota, Lakota First Nations in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. This offer is supposed to settle all the issues that we've ever had with the government. We have a singer in the audience here. So, it is Canada's position that the Dakota First Nations do not have Aboriginal rights in Canada. Nor do the historical facts give rise to a treaty adhesion claim. There was three of the reserves in Saskatchewan looked into the possibility of signing an adhesion to Treaty 4. So the government hired a researcher, and he conducted research on the Dakota people in Saskatchewan. And from that research, Canada came back and said, no, you don't have any rights in Canada. So that's where this treaty adhesion claim comes in. Therefore, the only remedy I can recommend to the minister to address the objectives listed in the Dakota proposal dated October 17, 2007 is to make a financial offer to assist the First Nations in meeting these objectives. I am prepared to recommend to the minister that an offer of $60.3 million in total for the 9 Dakota First Nations in Saskatchewan, Manitoba be made to address the objectives identified in your proposal. Canada's proposal lays out the offer on a First Nation basis, $6.7 million per First Nation, and is set out below in the order of the elements laid out in your proposal. So Canada says you have no rights as Dakota people. You're refugees from the United States. You're living here by our good grace, but we're going to offer you $60.3 million, divided up equally between the 9 bands. And at the bottom of this offer, it says, Canada says here $60.3 million, you have no rights as a people, as a nation. Canada will require comprehensive releases from each Dakota First Nation entering into a settlement agreement, releasing Canada from any future claims by the First Nations for Aboriginal and treaty rights identified in Section 35. So Canada says you have no rights, here's some money, if you take it, you have to sign away your rights that you don't have. All 9 of our chiefs rejected this unanimously. This was in the fall of 2007. When we took Canada to court last year, July of last year, there was only 3 left. Sioux Valley, Dakota Plains, Chinoopa.